when the petrodollar system has been, the standard for keeping the dollar the global, or reserve currency. The U.S. has gone to war and like killed millions of people to defend that. There are cases where, the U.S. government, or rather U.S. empire, is willing to go to extreme lengths to defend the dollar. So the idea that they would just sit idly by and just like let dollarization happen without having some sort of plan in the works, especially knowing that they couldn't keep this going indefinitely and that the world was going to move at some point to a post-oil economy. I think it's important to keep in mind that these people have been very serious and played very dirty.
There are rumors and debates about the petrodollar agreement between Saudi Arabia and the US. Some people say the deal is ending, while others call it fake news. Some even think this deal never existed. Whitney Webb, founder of Unlimited Hangout, says the US dollar is strong because it can keep its value globally, even with inflation at home. For example, countries like Argentina use stablecoins instead of their own inflating currencies. Whitney thinks the decline of the petrodollar system is a planned change with big impacts. Historically, the US has protected the dollar's dominance, even using military action like the Iraq invasion in 2003 and the Libya regime change in 2011. This shows how important the petrodollar is to the US economy. Given this, Whitney believes the US won't let the petrodollar system weaken without a fight. As the world moves away from oil, the US is expected to use new strategies, possibly including cryptocurrencies, to keep its economic power. Stay until the end of the video to hear Whitney Webb explain how major corporations develop plans to maintain and strengthen the financial supremacy of the US dollar indefinitely. Also guys, only a small percentage of my viewers are actually subscribed. If you enjoy staying up to date with finance content, consider subscribing or liking the video. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Now, here's Whitney Webb as she unpacks what the government has been doing behind our backs.
Well, on the case of Saudi Arabia dumping the petrodollar, you could argue that Mohammed bin Salman for some time has been moving away from the dollar well before that official announcement. Basically, when he came to power, he was trying to move Saudi Arabia to a post-oil economy. He launched his Vision 2030 plan and made overtures there that he was going to try and move Saudi Arabia away from oil and sort of make it a leader in the fourth industrial revolution, including in fintech. And we've also seen like other big actors in Middle Eastern oil specifically, like in the United Arab Emirates, for example, do kind of essentially the same thing. So I think it's something that sort of has been planned for some time. And what's interesting is that MBS, as soon as he came to power and during the Trump administration, was very close to Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, who was also we know from emails that have since come out promoting the idea of like stable coins, like an official US dollar stablecoin. He actually, I think it was like a Sam Altman blog post that he shared with Steve Mnuchin of the Treasury Department, talking about, the USD coin, which, this is before Circle launched USDC, but interesting. So it's very possible that these discussions were being had like some time ago, that it's not as recent as it may appear to be based on headlines that have been coming out recently. All I really want to add to that is that it's important to keep in mind that like when the petrodollar system has been the standard for keeping the dollar the global or reserve currency, the US has gone to war and like killed millions of people to defend that. One of the likely motivations, obviously there's more than one, but one of the key ones in invading Iraq, I would argue, was the fact that Saddam Hussein, not long before the invasion, had started selling oil in euros instead of dollars and made a lot more money, showing by example to other, other OPEC members that they could make more money selling in different currencies than the dollar. And then, of course, you have the case of Libya in 2011, where Gaddafi was trying to move to a gold-backed currency called the dinar and was selling that to African countries, a lot of which either use dollars or they use, French financial stuff. And that's why you had the US and France essentially lead that regime change operation with devastating consequences for Libya, which used to be the safest country in Africa, then became the most dangerous, and has been cited as an example of or a reason for why immigration got so out of control in Europe after that point. So there are cases where the U.S. government, or rather U.S. empire, is willing to go to extreme lengths to defend the dollar. So the idea that they would just sit idly by and just let dollarization happen without having some sort of plan in the works, especially knowing that they couldn't keep this going indefinitely and that the world was going to move at some point to a post-oil economy. I think it's important to keep in mind that these people have been very serious and played very dirty and created insane instability just to keep the dollar the global reserve currency, because it gives a lot of advantages just to the US. And I fully feel that they intend to keep those advantages, even if it means a different system. And the big picture is that countries like Argentina and also Lebanon and several countries throughout the world have been targeted by economic warfare for a very long time. Argentina is a very good example. You could argue it began in the 70s and the 80s, and with the economic policy. I mean, when Argentina was a military dictatorship, some of the financial policies they adopted were completely insane. You had a neoliberal in power during the 90s who was very bad for Argentina, in my opinion, Carlos Menem. And then you had their economic collapse in 2001, which, again, you could argue was a direct consequence of a lot of those policies, both of the dictatorship and of Menem's presidency. And then you have the IMF come in and all these other entities. And what they try and do after the 2001 economic collapse is have Argentina engage in things like debt for land swaps, debt for resources swaps. And this has been going on not just in Argentina, but lots of, most of Latin America, arguably, for a very long time. And it's a resource grab.
Yeah.
And, some of what we allude to in this piece and what we hope to allude to in an upcoming reports and a book is that a lot of the people that I've written about and that Mark's written about and that we've written about together are the engineers of that expressly. And by blowing out Latin American debt in the 80s and 90s, it was a way to basically yoke Latin America to the United States and, or more broadly, a lot of the transnational economic interests that are based in the United States, like Wall Street banks, for example. They engineered a lot of this, and so the situation in Argentina now didn't just come out of nowhere. And obviously, Argentina's central bank has a lot of the blame, but that also didn't happen in a vacuum. Presidents appointed the heads of the central bank that made those policies. And even someone like Milei, who's railed against the Central Bank of Argentina, put former central bank president in a top post in his cabinet. So these are choices that have been made by politicians. As someone who's been and reported from the ground on Argentina and on Argentinian politics, the corruption there, they just don't even, there's politicians in Argentina that don't even try to hide how corrupt they are. It's just flagrant in some instances in a way like I've never experienced anywhere else in the entire world. So I honestly think that what's happening in Argentina, yes, those people have may need stable coins because of the current economic situation, but I think that it was engineered to be that way. They were engineered into that position. And who benefits from that? The same people that I would argue created the solution and created the problem. I would add about the tether play. I think it's really similar, but in reverse of what Elon Musk is doing. So Tether started off with money, right, with the stable coin. And now they're going into satellites and brain chips. Musk is doing brain chips and satellites, and he took over a social network, arguably for the user data. And now he's turning or has made it very explicit his intentions to turn Twitter X into a bank that he hopes to be half of the financial system. Why is that happening? It's very odd. And then when you consider all these PayPal link ups, well, of course, Musk being a co-founder of PayPal, it's all very So in the case of US intelligence, if you go back to the very beginning, and there's even CIA deputy directors that have said that, it was all Wall Street people at the beginning. It was Wall Street lawyers, it was Wall Street bankers. And since that point, from the genesis of the CIA, there's been revolving doors between CIA and Wall Street that have continued up until today. And really, you could look at the CIA as a public-private enterprise in some sense. It's a public security agency, but it's more or less functioned throughout its history as Wall Street's secret police. That's why its earliest coups, for example, like its first coup in Guatemala, was done on behalf of United Fruit, a major multinational corporation headquartered in the United States, which, interestingly enough, was later acquired by Leon Black's father, and then Leslie Wexner's business mentor.
I know that name.
Yeah. And then you also have, like the coup in Iran, over like Anglo-American oil, like them losing their holdings there. The coup in 1973 in Chile, you can argue, was because of efforts to nationalize copper and all these largely Western mining companies losing out, and then they come in and do a coup and what have you. It's really been symbiotic for some time. And I think, as we moved into the information age, the CIA saw an opportunity. Well, let me back up a little bit. The internet from the very beginning was, it originally started as ARPANET, a project of the Pentagon. And for anyone that really wants to know about that history, I would highly recommend the book Surveillance Valley by Yasha Levine. It was essentially created in Vietnam as a counterinsurgency program. That was the goal of it, by the same people that were involved in things like the Phoenix program, which was the first instance of military intelligence, at least U.S. military intelligence, using databases to come up with names of dissidents and then assassinating them. And a lot of them weren't actually dissidents, like suspected dissidents or neighbors of dissidents and all of this stuff. And then from Phoenix program, it goes, all these CIA-backed dictatorships, like, Pinochet in Chile, for example, Operation Condor, use the exact same system. And they've been building these systems with the internet even before the modern internet as we use it now existed. And so a lot of these there were efforts early on to king-make the companies who would come to dominate the internet. And that has happened. It's just a matter of public record. If you look at the biggest companies in big tech, I've done work about how Facebook was essentially launched as a resurrection of a failed DARPA program called LifeLog by the same person that resurrected the failed DARPA program, Total Information Awareness, one of the most insane surveillance proposals ever in U.S. history, resurrected as Palantir. You can thank Peter Thiel for that, co-founder of PayPal. And a lot of these other companies that have become huge, Google, for example, there's a good article by Nafez Ahmed written on by Insert, when he published at Insert Intelligence, called How the CIA Made Google. If you look at a lot of these companies, you will find intelligence agencies at the beginning. Palantir, I mentioned earlier, took In-Q-Tel money, developed very closely with the CIA. It began at PayPal. It's a PayPal spin-off, Palantir is. Oracle, another huge company in Silicon Valley. Larry Ellison, before he started Oracle, was working on Project Oracle at the CIA on databases, and was the infrastructure for Oracle as we know it now. A lot of these, there's been a lot of symbiosis between intelligence agencies and these big companies for a long time, and they couldn't have done it without venture capital. And that's arguably why the CIA launched In-Q-Tel in the late 90s, because they wanted to become big players in Silicon Valley.
After the 2001 economic collapse, Argentina was in trouble, trading land and resources for debt relief. Big international groups, mostly from the US, controlled these deals. Whitney Webb says stablecoins might help a bit, but they don't solve the main issues. Argentina's problems go back to the 1970s and 80s dictatorship and the 1990s policies under Carlos Menem. These made Argentina dependent on outside help, like from the IMF. To fix things, Whitney suggests Argentina needs long-term solutions that reduce reliance on outside forces and ensure stability. Finally, the US dollar system, strengthened by military and economic actions, is now facing new challenges from rising economic powers and changing global politics. As the petrodollar system weakens, countries are using different financial tools and digital currencies to gain economic independence and influence. This is leading to new and complex economic strategies for stability. Anyway guys, before we go, if you want to stay most up to date on the crypto and Bitcoin world, make sure to subscribe to my daily 5-minute crypto newsletter. It's a concise resource for the latest expert predictions, breaking news, and top on-chain analysis, trusted by over 50,000 subscribers for insightful crypto investment information. Don't miss out on the opportunity to stay informed in the crypto market. The link is in the description below. I hope you all enjoyed today's video and that it provided you with some value. I'll see you all in the next one, and as always, all the best.